Truth doesn't need a weapon. It is the weapon. Here's something fascinating. According to social psychology, when someone's actions don't align with the image they want others to believe, they experience a mental tension called cognitive dissonance. In plain language, that tight, uncomfortable feeling when your truth walks into the room and their mask starts sweating. That's you. You are walking, breathing evidence that reality still exists in a world built on performance. And the scary part for them, you're not even trying to expose them. You're just living in a way that makes their carefully constructed falsehoods shrivel like spinach in a hot pan. The moment you show up, the air shifts. Jokes stop being funny, lies stop being smooth, and suddenly someone's avoiding eye contact like they just remembered they left the stove on in 2009. Your honesty is like flipping on a bright light in a room full of cockroaches. And trust me, none of them are doing the cha-cha to get closer to you. People think exposure is about secrets coming out. No. Exposure is when truth refuses to leave, no matter how many layers of excuses they try to pile over it. And that's why they can't stand you. Your existence forces them to meet the one person they've been avoiding for years, themselves. Number 1, you carry the mirror. They avoid looking into. You carry a mirror that most people don't want to look into, and the reflection has nothing to do with physical appearance. It's about the unfiltered truth of who they are when the act drops. You don't have to lecture them, you don't have to tell them they're wrong, you don't even have to mention their flaws. They feel it. Your presence becomes a silent confrontation. It's not that you're walking around trying to catch people out. It's that you live in a way that makes lies uncomfortable and half-truths too heavy to hold. For years, some people have perfected the art of avoiding themselves. They've built an image, a version of who they want others to believe they are. They've wrapped that image in charm, good manners, selective memory, and carefully crafted stories. Around most people, they can keep it up without a problem. But when they meet you, something strange happens. The mask they've worn for so long starts to feel like it doesn't fit anymore, because you're not interacting with the mask. You're connecting with the person underneath it, and that person knows you can see them. It's uncomfortable because it's rare. Most of the world will play along with whatever role someone is performing. People will smile, nod, and help others maintain the illusion. But you have no interest in playing that game. You don't give false affirmations to keep the peace, and you don't pretend not to notice when someone's words and actions don't match. You treat the truth like oxygen, necessary, non-negotiable, and not up for debate. That's why they feel exposed. They might not even be able to explain it. All they know is that being around you makes them self-conscious in a way they aren't with anyone else. They suddenly hear themselves more clearly. They notice the contradictions in their own stories, and they feel the weight of the things they've been ignoring. It's not because you're judging them, but because you live without needing to hide anything yourself, and that's the part that stings. Deep down, they know the mirror you hold isn't distorted. What they see in it is real, and it's the version of themselves they've worked hardest to avoid. You didn't expose them with accusations, you exposed them with truth simply by being who you are. Number 2, your existence destroys the excuses they've built their lives on. Some people have built their entire life around excuses. They've convinced themselves that certain dreams are impossible, that certain goals are unrealistic, and that living with compromise is just how the real world works. They'll say things like, "That's just the way it is," not because it's true, but because it's easier than admitting they chose comfort over courage. It's how they justify staying in the same place, avoiding risks, and never holding themselves to a higher standard. Then you came along and, without trying, tore that entire belief system apart. You didn't do it by arguing with them or preaching to them. You did it by being proof that what they said couldn't be done was possible after all. You became living evidence that success can be built without selling your soul, that you can stand by your values and still move forward, that you can rise without stepping on others to get there. Your very existence interrupts their narrative and forces them to reevaluate everything they've been telling themselves to feel better about not trying harder. That's the kind of confrontation most people don't want. It's not loud or aggressive, but it's devastating to the ego. Because if what you've accomplished is real, and clearly it is, then their excuses fall apart. They can no longer hide behind the claim that the game is rigged against everyone because you played and still won. They can't say no one can succeed without compromise when you've done exactly that. The moment you walk in, the room feels different for them because their favorite hiding place, the excuse, just got demolished. It's not that they secretly hate you for it. It's more complicated than that. Part of them may admire you, maybe even wish they could do what you've done. But admiration is hard to admit when it's mixed with the bitter taste of being proven wrong. So instead of being inspired, they can grow defensive. They'll pick apart your methods, try to downplay your results, or call you lucky just to protect the fragile comfort of their old beliefs. And that's why they feel exposed around you. You didn't just challenge their excuses, you made it impossible for those excuses to exist. You became undeniable proof that the problem was never the system, the timing, or the opportunity. The problem was that they never wanted it bad enough to pay the real price for it. Number 3, you refuse to participate in their collective lie. A lot of environments run on silent agreements, unspoken deals that everyone is expected to honor. These are not written contracts, but they're powerful. They say things like, "We don't talk about certain truths here," or "We all pretend this behavior is normal," or "We protect certain people no matter what they do." It's how families keep generational secrets, how workplaces protect toxic leaders, and how social circles maintain a fake image. Everyone knows the truth on some level, but the unspoken rule is that you play along or you get pushed out. You are the person who refuses to play along. You don't sign the invisible contract. You're not rude, reckless, or looking for conflict, but you also won't swallow a lie just to make others comfortable. And that's where the tension starts, because when you won't participate in the collective lie, you break the illusion for everyone. You become the one person who makes the truth impossible to bury completely. This isn't about gossip or stirring trouble, it's about living in a way that is consistent everywhere, whether someone's watching or not. When you show up, you make it clear that you're not available for fake peace or false unity, and while some people respect that, others see it as a direct threat. In their eyes, you're not just being honest, you're threatening the very structure they've depended on to survive. That's why they often try to isolate you or label you as difficult. If they can convince others that you're the problem, then no one has to address the real issue. But deep down they know it's not you they're afraid of. It's what you represent. You are proof that it's possible to live without bending to the collective lie. You make it obvious that silence and compliance are choices, not necessities. For people who have spent years protecting the system, your refusal to participate feels like betrayal. It shines a light on their own compromise. It makes their loyalty to the lie look less like wisdom and more like fear. And that's the heart of why they feel exposed. You didn't call them out by name. You didn't reveal their secrets. You simply refused to join in. And that was enough to make the truth louder than it has ever been in that space. Number 4, your standards. Feel like an attack to the unprincipled. When you live by a higher standard, you don't need to point fingers or make speeches. Your life itself does the talking. For people who have learned to cut corners, bend the truth, or settle for less than what's right, being around you is uncomfortable. You're not trying to shame them, but the gap between what you accept for yourself and what they've accepted for themselves is hard for them to ignore. It's like your standards hold up a measuring stick they never agreed to be measured against, and yet they can't unsee it once it's there. The tension comes from the fact that they know deep down they could have done better. They could have been more honest, more disciplined, more consistent, but they didn't want to pay the price that comes with that. Maybe they told themselves that integrity doesn't really matter, that everyone compromises, that good enough is fine. Those beliefs help them sleep at night. But then you show up, quietly proving all of that wrong just by the way you live, and it pokes a hole in the comfort they've been enjoying. It's not that they wish you were corrupt. It's that they wish you were like them. Because if you were, they wouldn't have to face the uncomfortable truth that they could have chosen differently all along. Instead, you're proof that it's possible to live in a way that doesn't require selling out, and that's a truth they'd rather not acknowledge. So they translate their discomfort into hostility. They'll say you're too rigid or too much, or that you think you're better than everyone. These labels aren't really about you. They're shields to protect themselves from having to change. Your refusal to lower your standards isn't about judging others. It's about protecting the life you've committed to living. But to the unprincipled, it feels like an attack, because it forces them to see that their choices were exactly that. Choices. They weren't forced into mediocrity or compromise. They chose it. And now, standing next to someone who didn't, they have to live with that awareness. That's why your standards make them feel exposed. You're not asking them to meet you at your level. You're simply refusing to drop down to theirs. And that decision alone is enough to make them feel like you've put them on trial without saying a single word. Number 5. You see patterns they thought were invisible. Some people are skilled at hiding their intentions. They move in subtle ways, planting seeds, bending narratives, and positioning themselves so they always appear in the best light. They count on others being distracted, too trusting, or too naive to notice the trail they're leaving behind. This is why they thrive. Most people only see the surface, the polished version of events, and never connect the smaller details that reveal the bigger truth. You're different. You don't just see what's in front of you. You notice the rhythm behind it. You catch patterns in behavior, tone, timing, and choices that most people overlook. A casual comment to someone else might mean nothing, but you remember when it contradicts something they said last month. A sudden burst of generosity might look kind on the surface, but you can tell it's just a strategic move to buy influence. They can't hide their game from you because you read between the lines naturally without even trying. This ability makes people uneasy, especially those who rely on deception to maintain control. They're used to pulling the strings while everyone else dances without realizing it. But with you, the dance feels different, because you've already spotted the puppet master in the corner. Even when you don't call them out, they can feel that you've clocked their methods. You're not fooled by surface charm or convenient timing. You've already mapped the path they're taking, sometimes before they've even finished laying it out. The real problem for them isn't just that you can see the pattern, it's that you can remember it. You connect events over months or years, building a full picture of what's really going on. That makes their usual tricks useless. They can't rely on you to forget, and they can't get comfortable thinking you'll only notice the obvious. And so they feel exposed in your presence. They know that the game they've been playing in the shadows is fully visible to you, even when they act as if nothing's wrong. They can't relax because they understand that nothing they do slips past you unnoticed. You've dismantled the invisibility they once depended on, and without it, they're left vulnerable. Not because you've confronted them, but because you've already seen everything they were hoping no one would see. Number 6. You don't confuse niceness with goodness. There's a huge difference between being nice and being good, but in today's world, those two get confused all the time. Niceness is about presentation, the tone of your voice, the smile on your face, the polite phrases you use to keep everyone comfortable. Goodness is about substance, the decisions you make, the way you treat people when no one's watching, the integrity you uphold even when it costs you something. The problem is a lot of people have mastered niceness as a disguise for a lack of goodness. They know how to be agreeable and charming while doing things that are selfish, harmful, or downright corrupt behind the scenes. You don't fall for that act. You don't confuse a friendly tone with a trustworthy heart. You look past how someone appears and watch what they actually do. You've seen enough to know that the person who greets everyone with kindness isn't automatically a good person. Sometimes, they're just skilled at keeping their darker motives hidden. And because you operate from truth, not appearances, you can sense when someone's niceness is just a cover. This ability unsettles people who depend on their charm to get away with things. They're used to being liked, being trusted, and having doors opened for them simply because they know how to play the part. But with you, the mask slips almost instantly. You don't give extra credit for politeness when the actions underneath tell a different story. That makes them uncomfortable because it means their usual tactics, the ones that work on everyone else, don't work on you. To you, goodness is proven in how someone handles responsibility, how they treat the vulnerable, how they behave when no one is watching. Sweet words don't impress you if they're followed by selfish choices. A pleasant attitude doesn't erase dishonest actions. That's why people feel exposed around you. You're not distracted by the packaging. You're focused on the contents. And here's the truth they can't escape. Niceness can be rehearsed, but goodness can't be faked for long. You're not fooled by surface-level charm because you've learned to measure people by their consistency, their actions, and their truth. That's why those who hide behind politeness get nervous around you. You see the reality they've worked hard to keep hidden. Number 7. You remember what they pray others forget. Some people count on time to erase their wrongs. They live as if the past can be conveniently edited, with their mistakes and betrayals fading into the background until no one talks about them anymore. They rewrite history in a way that makes them look better, downplaying the harm they caused, twisting events so they appear like the victim, or completely omitting the parts that would make them look guilty. For many, this works, because most people either forget, move on, or choose not to dig too deeply. But you're different. You remember. You don't carry grudges, but you also don't erase facts just because time has passed. And it's not just that you recall what happened. You remember the sequence, the details, and the intentions behind it. You store these things quietly, without needing to bring them up at every turn, but they're there. That alone makes people uneasy, because they can't depend on your memory to fade the way others do. What unsettles them even more is that you connect the dots. You're able to see how past behavior lines up with present patterns, revealing that what happened before wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of who they are. While others are willing to give them a clean slate over and over, you notice that their mistakes aren't accidents at all, but deliberate choices repeated in different ways. This makes you a threat to those who survive on selective memory. They can't control the narrative around you the way they do with others. If they try to spin a story, you already have the context that exposes the spin. If they attempt to play innocent, you can recall the exact moments that contradict their claim. They don't even have to hear you say anything. Just knowing you know is enough to make them uneasy. It's not about keeping score. It's about refusing to live in denial. You don't distort the truth to make people more comfortable, and you won't pretend something never happened just because they've decided it's more convenient that way. That's why they feel exposed in your presence. You don't just remember the parts they'd rather erase. You remember how all the pieces fit together, and that kind of clarity can't be manipulated. Number 8. You thrive without joining their circle of compromise. Some people are convinced that the only way to get ahead is to play dirty. They believe that every person who reaches the top must have lied, cheated, stepped on others, or made shady deals to get there. It's their favorite excuse for why they haven't achieved more. If success requires compromise, then staying small becomes proof of their integrity. It's a comfortable story to tell themselves because it lets them feel morally superior while avoiding the hard work and discipline that real success demands. Then you come along and ruin the script. You're not just surviving without compromise. You're thriving. You've achieved things they said were impossible without selling out. And you've done it openly, without hiding who you are or bending your principles to fit in. That shakes them because it means their narrative is built on a lie. If you can rise without cutting corners, then maybe they could have too. And that's a truth they'd rather not face. The part that unsettles them most is that your success is undeniable. You're not barely scraping by while clinging to your morals. You're doing well, and you're doing it in a way that's visible. There's no backroom deal they can point to, no scandal they can whisper about, no dirt they can dig up to prove you're like everyone else. You're proof that integrity doesn't have to be sacrificed for achievement, and that proof makes their excuses collapse. It also removes the shield they've been hiding behind. If they can no longer claim everyone's dirty at the top, then they have to admit that maybe they just didn't have the discipline, vision, or courage to pursue their goals in a clean way. That realization is uncomfortable, so instead of being inspired by your example, some will try to discredit it. They'll say, "You got lucky," or that you had advantages they didn't, or that you're not really as ethical as you seem. These are just attempts to protect themselves from the truth you represent. You didn't set out to expose them. You simply chose not to join their circle of compromise and still managed to win. And in doing that, you've shattered one of their most trusted lies, that success without corruption is impossible. You've shown that it's not only possible, but powerful. Number 9, you're not for sale, and they are. In corrupt systems, the whole game is built on the belief that everyone can be bought. It's not just about money. It's about favors, influence, opportunities, status, or anything else that can make someone trade their principles for personal gain. The people running these systems operate with one unshakable assumption. Given the right offer, anyone will fold. That's how they maintain control. They don't have to threaten most people. They just have to tempt them. But you disrupt that entire economy. When the offer comes, you refuse. It's not because you don't recognize the value of what's being presented. It's because you value yourself, your integrity, and your future more. That single no does more damage than you realize. It doesn't just stop them from buying you. It exposes that their control over others has never been about respect or loyalty. It's always been about payment. And once someone sees you stand firm without taking the deal, it plants a dangerous thought in their minds. Maybe they don't have to sell themselves either. That's why your refusal feels like an attack to them. You're not just declining an offer, you're proving that the foundation of their power isn't unshakable. If someone can't be bought, then they can't be owned, and if they can't be owned, they can't be controlled. That's a problem for people who depend on transactional loyalty to keep their position safe. It also forces them to confront their own choices. They know deep down that they said yes where you said no. They took the deal. They compromised. And in seeing you stand where they fell, the truth about their own price tag becomes impossible to ignore. They might dress it up as being realistic or doing what you have to do, but your existence proves it was never necessity. It was willingness. They'll often try to spin your refusal as arrogance, stubbornness, or even stupidity, because admitting the real reason, that you can't be bought, would mean admitting the opposite about themselves. But no matter how they frame it, the reality doesn't change. You've shown them that there are people who can't be purchased, and in doing so, you've made their whole system look weaker than they want anyone to believe. Number 10, you make cowardice impossible to hide. Courage has a way of making fear stand out, and that's exactly why some people feel exposed around you. They've built a life where avoidance is normal, sidestepping uncomfortable truths, staying quiet when speaking up might cost them something, playing it safe in every situation. They call it being smart, practical, or knowing when to pick your battles, but often it's just fear in disguise. As long as everyone else around them operates the same way, they can believe they're doing the right thing. Then you step in. You face the very things they've been avoiding. You speak up when the room falls silent. You take a stand when the easy choice would be to step aside. You act when others are frozen, and you don't flinch when the cost of action is high. It's not that you're reckless. It's that you refuse to live as a prisoner to fear. And when you do that, their avoidance suddenly looks a lot less like wisdom and a lot more like cowardice. This creates a problem for them. If they admit your courage is admirable, they have to admit their own inaction is a form of surrender. But that's hard to face, so instead they'll downplay what you do. They might call you lucky, impulsive, or accuse you of not understanding the risks. These labels are just ways to protect their own ego from the truth that your bravery is revealing, that they've been letting fear make their decisions for them. Your courage removes the safe illusion they've been living in. It forces a comparison they didn't ask for but can't avoid. They can no longer pretend they're brave simply because they've avoided obvious danger. Now they have to reckon with the fact that bravery is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. And you've shown them what that actually looks like. That's why they can't relax around you. Your presence is a constant reminder that fear doesn't have to win, that action is possible, and that their excuses aren't unshakable truths. You make cowardice visible, not by calling it out, but by making courage undeniable. And once they've seen the difference, they can never pretend not to know it. Number 11. You live in the open while they depend on shadows. Some people survive by keeping things hidden, not just mistakes, but entire parts of who they are. Their power, influence, or reputation rests on selective truth-telling, carefully managed appearances, and keeping certain doors closed so no one can see what's really inside. They've built a life in the shadows, where information is currency, and secrecy is their safety net. As long as no one asks too many questions, they can keep the image intact. You don't live like that. You don't need to. Your motives, choices, and even your past can stand in the open without fear of collapse. You don't hide your intentions because you're not plotting anything that would crumble under scrutiny. You don't cover your history because you've owned it, learned from it, and moved forward. You're not trying to protect an image. You're simply living in a way that can survive being seen clearly. That difference alone makes some people uncomfortable. Transparency has a strange effect. It doesn't just reveal the open person, it also throws shadows into sharper contrast. When you can stand in the light without flinching, it makes others wonder what they would have to hide if the same light was on them. And if they're hiding a lot, your openness becomes threatening. Not because you've exposed their secrets, but because you've shown that secrets aren't the only way to live. Your presence becomes a quiet challenge to their entire way of operating. They depend on controlled narratives, but you don't need one. They protect themselves by limiting what others know, but you don't operate under those restrictions. They've built their strength in the dark, but you've built yours in the light, and that makes them question the foundation they're standing on. People like this often try to spin transparency as naivety, saying you don't understand how the game works or that you're too open. But what they really mean is that your openness makes it harder for them to justify their secrecy. It removes the idea that hiding is always necessary or wise. And the truth is, once people see that it's possible to live without constant concealment, they start wondering what exactly is hiding in the shadows. That's why your life in the open feels so exposing to those who depend on the dark. Number 12. You don't just spot the lie, you spot the motivation behind it. Catching a lie is one thing. Plenty of people can notice when a story doesn't add up or when someone's words don't match the facts. But you don't stop there. You don't just hear the falsehood. You start tracing its roots. You ask yourself why it was told, what it's meant to hide, and what bigger plan it's connected to. That's the part that unsettles people the most. When someone lies, they're often counting on the listener to either believe them or drop the matter after spotting the inconsistency. Most won't dig deeper because it feels uncomfortable, confrontational, or unnecessary. But you don't take things at face value. If something feels off, you start mapping it against other things you've seen and heard. You notice how it fits a pattern, what the timing suggests, and whose interests it serves. By the time others are still processing the surface-level lie, you've already understood the machinery behind it. This is dangerous for people who depend on deception to get their way. A lie can survive being caught if no one uncovers its purpose, but you strip it bare. You reveal the strategy behind it, which often exposes not just one falsehood, but an entire network of manipulation. That's why people who are used to controlling the narrative get tense around you. They can feel that you're not easily distracted by the details they throw out to mislead you. You're watching the entire board, not just the piece they're moving. And it's not about being paranoid or suspicious of everyone. It's about understanding that lies are rarely random. They're tools, and tools are always used for a reason. You've learned that uncovering the reason is where the real truth lives. This makes you harder to fool and harder to control because you're not reacting to the lie itself. You're dismantling the intent behind it. People who operate in dishonesty can't relax around someone like that. They know that even if you don't call them out immediately, you've already seen more than they wanted you to. You've connected the dots they hoped would stay scattered. And once you've identified the motivation, their lie doesn't just lose its power, their whole strategy starts to fall apart. Number 13. Your integrity can't be manipulated into silence. Most people can be pressured into silence if you hit the right nerve. You appeal to their sense of loyalty. Don't say anything, we're family. You guilt-trip them. If you speak up, you'll ruin everything we've built. You leverage social pressure. Everyone else is fine with this. Why can't you be? These tactics work because most people don't want to be seen as disloyal, difficult, or the one who caused trouble. But that doesn't work on you. You've made a decision. Loyalty to truth comes before loyalty to image, comfort, or personal alliances. You've learned that protecting the wrong thing, even for the sake of peace, is how rot spreads unnoticed. And because you refuse to play along, you can't be managed by the usual manipulation scripts. They can't wave the loyalty flag and expect you to stand down. They can't imply you're being unkind by telling the truth and expect you to feel bad enough to stop. What unsettles people is that your integrity doesn't have a back door they can sneak through. You're not the type to bend the rules just this once because it's someone you care about or because it would make things easier. And because you won't be guilted or flattered into silence. The people who want to keep certain truths buried realize you're a genuine threat to their control. This doesn't mean you go around broadcasting every flaw you see. It means you will not be complicit in deception. That's a different kind of power, one that terrifies manipulators. They're used to finding the weak point in a person's moral armor, the thing they can press to make them cave. When they can't find that in you, they're left with no leverage. And here's the thing. You're not hard to control because you're stubborn. You're hard to control because you've already decided what you stand for, and you're willing to take the cost that comes with it. That's why those who thrive in secrecy can't stand you. Your very existence disrupts their playbook. They realize that the only way to stop you is to discredit you because they can't negotiate your principles away. Your silence can't be bought, borrowed, or bullied, and that makes you unmanageable. Number 14. You don't just reveal them. You remove the room they hide in. Some people survive by controlling the stage they're on. They set the lighting so the shadows hide their flaws. They control the narrative so their version of events is the only one anyone hears, and they surround themselves with people who will play along. This setup allows them to keep running the same tricks for years, sometimes decades, without ever being challenged. Then you arrive, and you don't just flick the lights on for a second to say, "Look, here they are." You change the entire lighting system so there's no shadow left to hide in. You change how people interact, how decisions get made, and what gets tolerated. The very atmosphere shifts, and suddenly the old tactics stop working. Lies fall flat because the room now runs on facts. Manipulation fails because people have been given permission to think for themselves. This is why your presence feels like an existential threat to them. It's not just the embarrassment of being caught in one bad act. It's the realization that their entire method of survival has been rendered obsolete. You've dismantled the stage they performed on, taken away the props they leaned on, and replaced the script they used to control the room. The most unsettling part for them is that you don't even have to directly attack them to make this happen. By simply operating differently, by being consistent, transparent, and grounded in truth, you introduce a new standard. That new standard spreads, and it quietly erodes the structures they depend on. What used to be normal, whisper networks, backdoor deals, unspoken rules, becomes impossible in an environment you've influenced. This is why they don't just dislike you. They panic. You don't only expose what they've done, you make it impossible for them to keep doing it. And deep down, they know they can't adapt, because their power was never built on real skill, value, or integrity. It was built on controlling the environment. Once that environment changes, they're not just revealed, they're irrelevant. You don't just pull back the curtain, you remove the curtain rod, repaint the walls, and install windows so wide that the whole world can see in. In other words, you don't just expose, you dismantle. The truth about you is undeniable. You are not just a witness to reality. You are a force that makes others confront it, whether they like it or not. You walk in integrity while the unprincipled stumble in shadows. You uphold standards that make compromise impossible to ignore. You see patterns they thought were invisible, uncover motivations they hoped would stay hidden, and remember truths they desperately want erased. You thrive without surrendering your principles, refuse every attempt to buy or manipulate you, and dismantle the very environments where deception once thrived. What makes you extraordinary is not only that you reveal the truth, it's that you live it. Every action, every choice, every word you speak operates from a foundation so firm that it leaves no room for pretense. People feel exposed, not because you attack them, but because you refuse to bend, hide, or lower yourself to meet their compromises. Your life is a mirror, a light, a measuring stick, and a standard, all at once. And here's the ultimate reality. They can't hide, they can't manipulate, and they can't survive comfortably in your presence. The very fact that you exist unsettles the unprincipled because you prove, without effort or malice, that living by truth is not only possible but powerful. You don't just walk past deceit, you redefine the space around it. You don't just reveal, you dismantle. And that is why your presence will always be a reckoning, a quiet but unstoppable force that exposes weakness, hypocrisy, and fear. Never forget, being true to yourself is your greatest weapon, and living in alignment with truth is your ultimate shield. The world may try to test you, but they can never control you, because you are loyal to something far greater than opinion, influence, or fear. You walk in truth, and they will never recover from the clarity you bring. If this message resonated with you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our community of truth seekers. Don't forget to like this video if it opened your eyes and comment below. I want to hear your thoughts and experiences. Share this with someone who needs to see it because